and their programs to ensure quality meat. 734-9949. I have a very special guest in the studio with me who he's learning some traffic patterns around Twin Falls. Do you have GPS?
I do, but when you look at the map and GPS, I put it together and I got here only a couple minutes late.
No, it's fine. I had to, got a couple of things, business we have to do in the studio too as well. But John Brady is joining me in the studio, and I haven't seen him in about 11 months. Uh, at one time, we were practically neighbors. He actually lived, the road to get to the radio station was a little bit longer, but his house, as the crow flies, might have been less than a mile from the radio station where I worked at the time for 7 years.
7 years, we worked on a whole bunch of different things, Bill. It's great to see you. It's great to be here in Idaho. Finally, a couple fun things about my trip. My luggage was found late last night. I'll get it when I get back to Las Vegas later tonight. Your greeting, I don't know if you saw your text.
Yes.
Your welcoming group was very good. They were very punctual, very considerate, and he said he'll see you next month.
Yes.
The hotel was very nice, although I was only there about 5 hours, and it was worth the 500 miles to drive from Las Vegas without luggage, without a rent a car for 2 hours, to get in at 1:30 in the morning so I could be here in the studio at 8:20 in the morning or so, 8:20.
That clock is, yeah, one of the clocks is working. The other one, I think, is battery operated and died a long time ago.
Yeah, it looks like we're not quite at that time yet, but it's good to be here.
926 and 39. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. But John is on his way to a conference. He has an extensive background in law, political office as well, public service. Was the legal analyst for the radio station at my last job, and has, as I mentioned earlier, some of his acquaintances include the current vice president. You worked, of course, at the Attorney General's office in Delaware, so you knew the
Right.
vice president's son, late son.
Bo Biden, in fact, you had me on in late May, right after he passed. That Monday morning, I came on with you and talked a couple stories about Bo Biden. Um, but also, if I had time, I have a great picture of myself with President Bush the second. I say the second and first, but just to distinguish. I have a picture of me with the first also. But he's looking up at me because I'm like 6'4" and 300 plus. And I was trying to give him advice, but he's the best you can do.
Yes, well, he was bilingual, by the way. If you had just switched, maybe, because a fellow I knew by the name of Roy Bernardi got hired as assistant secretary of HUD because when he first greeted President Bush, he spoke to him in Spanish, and President Bush was impressed and said we could use this guy in Washington.
Was that the only Spanish he knew?
Yeah, 928. We've got a break coming up in a minute, but I'm going to share with you a clip in the next segment of the program. Your governor, who I've mentioned on this show because he's one of the co-creators of Common Core. He chaired the committee.
Yes, he did.
And he was on CNN with Wolf Blitzer yesterday talking about refugee resettlement. And Blitzer asked him a question that was a good question. Your governor, who looks like Lex Luthor, handled it quite well. But we want to talk about that in just a couple of minutes. The contrast between what's going on here versus what's going on in some of the bluer states. We want to point out, though, too, that John comes from the reddest part of Delaware. The South, which is geographically, the county there in the South is the biggest. On the other hand, the county in the North, geographically, is the smallest, still has more than double the population. So it dictates a lot of the decisions made in the state just simply because they have the numbers there. So those things are ahead, coming up in just a few minutes. I did wear this in today.
I see that.
John is a Philadelphia Phillies fan. I'm an
In
Eagles
fact,
fan.
I took you to your first Major League Baseball senior circuit game.
Yes, we went there, and I wore this hooded sweatshirt because if I'd worn something that said Washington Nationals, I probably would have gotten brained.
This is true.
Yeah.
And I tried to figure out what would be a good gift, and I was limited from something that you would missed from being over here for 11 months. So in my backpack, I had a guide.
Oh. So now I can go look at the used televisions and the like. And yes,
Absolutely.
the shopping guide from our home county. Hey, we've got more coming up in just a moment. It's 39. It's 9:30. John Brady in studio with us on Top Story with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. My studio guest is John Brady. A little bit more background on John. John, at one time, he was legislative counsel for the House Republicans. When they dominated at the time, they had control of the Delaware State House of Representatives. He was legislative counsel, so he wrote most of the laws at the time.
I wrote a lot of them, yes. I did that for 12 years until they lost
Control
in 2008.
And yet, most of the political players there because it's a small state, whether they're Democrats or Republicans.
That's correct. When you talk about a small state, you had a chance. I know both U.S. senators. I know, as I said, we talked about the vice president. Our congressman, I ran into him in Wilmington the other day. It's a nice size state for the type of things I did. I went to University of Richmond for political science, and then went to law school, and also spent a month up at Harvard and have a certificate from the Kennedy School.
And of course, we should point out too as well, you are registered. What do they call that at the bar for the Supreme Court?
Yes, I am a member of the bar of the Supreme Court for the state of Delaware, New Jersey, and the United States. I've been sworn in D.C. and got to meet 5 justices.
Your governor, your current governor, as we pointed out, he has a relationship to the creation of Common Core. He served as the state treasurer before he became the governor. Has been mentioned perhaps as an education secretary, been floated in Washington's name a few times. But he is also adamantly backing up the president on the refugee resettlement program. He was on CNN with Wolf Blitzer yesterday, and Blitzer told him that Donald Trump has said people who still support the program must be insane. And Blitzer came right out and said to Mr. Markell, "Are you insane?" And I want you to take a listen to his response on this, and maybe we can chat about it for a moment.
Sure.
First of all, the refugees who come over are the most carefully vetted from a security standpoint of anybody who comes into this country. They're vetted before they're even allowed to cross the Atlantic. And for some of these presidential candidates to say, for example, we should only let in Christians, are we going to rewrite what's on the Statue of Liberty? Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, so long as they're Christian? I mean, is that really who we are?
All right. Now, we have a friend who hosts a talk show, a mutual friend by the name of Duke Brooks back in your home state.
Yes.
Duke has often said that that's a poem, that's not law, that poem on the Statue of Liberty. And so I understand people, you can't necessarily choose people by religion who are coming here, but to try to invoke the poem, he's going to take a lot of heat for that.
He will, but he's in a position, he's in the second term, he can't be reelected as governor. He already announced to the people of Delaware that he wasn't running for anything in 2016. So he'll be unemployed by the 20th of January 2017. Unemployed, I mean, not in public office. Somebody will probably hire him. That's kind of how he is. He's always been an individual people. As you remember when you were there, he went for rights for groups like the gays, for marriage. He went for other discrimination. Last week, he pardoned a then was a freed slave who had been helping people escape. He was convicted and sold into slavery as part of his sentence, and he pardoned him for those crimes posthumously. So he just does it his way. First 4 years, we had a full head of hair. Last 4 years, yes, people have said he looks like Lex Luthor. I don't know if that was a bet or a dare or something, but he's gone that route. And he is, for a while, Delaware, which is and it was interesting he said that. You know, Delaware is politically blue for major statewide offices, although we now have 2 Republican statewide candidates who won this past year. One was new, one was reelected. For a while, before he became Attorney General, we had the only Jewish governor and lieutenant governor. So for him to say, do we vet only Christians, that takes it personal for him, because they would be saying he couldn't let anybody in of the Jewish faith. And it's really not up to a governor to say who comes into a state. The federal government, as he says, puts the refugees where they want to put them. And we have looked, we've had problems. We go back to 2001, how those people got the fake driver's licenses sold to them through Virginia so they could get through the screening, and how we saw them screen at places that weren't vigilant. We've all seen that video out of Maine where they came into Maine and then connected to Boston so they could get on the flight. So, it is sometimes a crapshoot when you figure out who comes in, who doesn't. There was that one Syrian refugee passport that was found last week in France, and we've had a whole bunch of breaking news overnight from France. So French are responding to it, but you're right. He is, other governors, in fact, the new governor, I say new, he's been there 2 years now, from Massachusetts, basically said, don't bring him here. We know Bobby Jindal would say that, and so would the governor out of Texas.
How quickly this all came down, though. We're up to, I think it's 26 governors say don't, and 4 say they prefer they not come.
Right.
So we're at 30, and then only a handful of governors have said, yes, we still welcome the program.
Right, and some of the governors have been surprising. I think the North Carolina governor was a little surprised when they say, we'd prefer you not place anybody here. And I think they're looking at their internal, although...
Governor Herbert, I believe a Republican from Utah, is one of those saying, we'll take them.
Right, and so it's coming down to an individual choice, and I do hope it works out. We know when you first went on radio and television, I'm going to backdate you back into the late 80s when you first went on, sir. I used to be able to fly under any name I wanted. They never checked the tickets against your driver's license. Now you go through everything. I haven't figured out why I need to take my belt off now. Do they really want to see me drop my pants in the screening line?
We've got more with John Brady coming up. He's our guest this half hour on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. My studio guest, John Brady, is joining us. Law professor, office holder. Your resume is quite extensive, and of course we should point out before that you were in hotel management. Before that, you helped run the Boy Scouts of America.
Yeah, I've done a few things over my life. My bucket list, but I'd never been to Idaho before, and so that's now off the bucket list, and we'll see maybe on the way south to Las Vegas again, I'll go clip over into Utah and knock that state off.
Yeah, that's one of my goals now is I've got to still get to Washington and Oregon, and I the Nevada trips are fun. I don't necessarily gamble, but I like walking through casinos.
Well, I will tell you
the pretty colors.
Absolutely. I will tell you the one thing that I noticed and that I almost got in trouble for was the sign after you pass the last gas station in town that says next gas 110 miles. And yeah, I got down. I was within 30 miles of my gas tank at that point when I got to that next gas. So I'm going to be a little more careful coming back. Yeah. And the rest areas that say, warning, rattlesnakes could pop out. That was always good for a little wake-up call when you go use the facilities.
And it's like Mad Max country out there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I learned that, if you have the other part of it, and you remember the movie from the 70s, Dennis Weaver is driving through a mountain state in a Plymouth Valiant and is being chased by a truck driver.
Yeah.
Well, every time last night the tanker truck came up behind me like that, I'd flashbacks to that, so I pulled over and let them pass.
That was a Steven Spielberg movie. I think it was his first big directorial job. And
it made an impact on me, especially when it says 183 miles and it has no facilities next 183 miles. So I'm thinking, okay, this will be a good 3-hour run.
I won't tell you what I do when I'm out in the desert.
I'll just leave that one out.
If you only offend the sage grouse,
yes,
it's
it's going to be hard for them to come testify in court.
It's the 39. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. We got to mention you're on your way to Vegas. You're going to a conference in Vegas.
And people ask me, how did you get out so early? Is the county paying for this? So for those people from Delaware listening, here's the full story. I saved the county money by flying out on Tuesday. I rented my own rental car with Priceline, and I got it for like 6 days. It's not reimbursed expense. It's out of my pocket. And so I came up here to visit and see Idaho and see my good friend Bill. And I'll go back. My reservation starts in Las Vegas tonight. I got a discounted rate off the conference, and I fly back on in the luggage. I'm going to wrap myself around my luggage so I know I get it when I get off the plane.
I want to point out, we talked a little bit about your governor and his decision on the refugees. You were hosting an event as an MC a few months ago, too, and out of the blue pulls up a limousine, and the vice president jumped out and grabbed the microphone. Now, obviously, he's not a terribly popular guy among my audience, most of the audience here, and probably even some people in Delaware, because he did always have occasional token opponents. But you know him on a personal level. Some people. There you go. There's a photograph of the two of you at that picnic. You know him on a personal level. What can you tell us about him?
He is honest as the day is long. And they were trying to ask him back in this last Saturday in August, was he going to run? He didn't want to talk politics about that. He came down to this group, and he's been coming to the Sussex County, Delaware Democratic Jamboree picnic for over 30 years. First one he came to was 1971, when he told people he was going to run for the U.S. Senate the next year, and he was only 28 at that point. The thing about him is that he will go and do whatever he can for people. He has his Joeisms. He's like that Uncle Joe at a Thanksgiving dinner. He'll say some of the things. You remember some of his famous quotes.
That's the Trump of the Democrat Party, right?
You could say that, yes. But he's changed a little bit. And here's the change. After Bo died, he has been more introspect and with family more often, and does things with family. He's been showing up at his grandchildren's sports events. He popped into, he's been spending the weekends more in Wilmington, getting ready for when he moves back home in 2017. And so it didn't surprise me that he made the announcement that he wasn't going to run. He wanted to be president. He wanted to be president the first time in '88. He wanted to be president in 2008. And he got the vice president. I think he's done good service for the country. I disagree with some of the decisions. I met Robert Bork. I think Robert Bork would have been great on the court, but didn't work out that way. And sometimes when it doesn't work out that way, new challenges, new opportunities open up.
Well, on that, we've got a short break coming up for Mike Gallagher. Then we'll have a few minutes to wrap up, because he has said he's not running. But if somebody else in that campaign is indicted, it could definitely change the landscape, and there might be a draft Biden moment. But we can chat about that in just a few minutes.
Sure.
Our studio guest, John Brady, he is joining us. He's on his way to Las Vegas, joining us from Delaware, and of course, speculating about what the vice president's plans may be if Hillary Clinton ends up walking away or is taken away, might be a better way to put that. In the meantime, Mike Gallagher coming up, brought to you exclusively by the financial advisors at Waddell & Reed in Twin Falls, 736-6563. Our studio guest is John Brady. For a few more minutes, he's joining us in studio on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com with Bill Colley. And of course, as I like to say, just as we get close to the end of the program, God willing and the creek don't rise, I hope to be back here tomorrow between 8 and 10 o'clock. That God willing and the creek don't rise is not original. There was a fellow by the name of Dan Kramer that you were acquainted with who
Yes, I am.
used to use that phrase when I would talk to him on the radio. So, there's not a lot of original stuff out there at all anymore. We were talking with John just before the break about Joe Biden saying, he's going to spend more time with his family and retire and the like and leave office. And before we get back to that topic in the last couple of minutes, I do want to remind you, if you are listening to the show, good. You've got great hearing. If you're having problems with your hearing, you're going to miss the show at some point. Give a call to Dr. Christine Pickup, a doctor of audiology at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. She's at 1218 9th Street, Unit number 2. You can reach her at 312-0957 or online at mountharrisonaudiology.com. Did you know that the health of the inner ear is affected by your cardiovascular and kidney health? The inner ear is sensitive to changes in your blood supply. If you've had recent heart problems or kidney problems, you should have your hearing checked right away. So if Hillary Clinton, and it's not out of the question, John, that she still could be indicted, or if there's evidence that says she could be indicted and they don't indict her, that could obviously anger the electorate to the point where they say, we're not going to vote for this woman. Uh, would you see Joe Biden being drafted by the Democrats at that point?
I think the draft Biden folks have just gone into a power down mode, but they're there. And if something happens, they're ready to kick something back off to get him in. And there are a lot of people who are not happy with Hillary Clinton. There are a lot of people who don't think Bernie Sanders or Martin O'Malley, and you remember Martin O'Malley from your time on Delmarva, are good for Democratic candidates. And it's sort of like the family I'm from. I was from what I call a mixed marriage. My dad was a Democrat. He's still alive. My mom was a Republican. I have a brother who's a Democrat who supports Trump, another brother who's a Republican who's not sure who he supports, and my sister will support the Republican candidate, whoever it is. And thankfully, some of them are in Pennsylvania. I've never really had to rely on them for votes when I've run.
Yeah.
But, it's at least Dad had crossed over when I ran a couple times as a Republican to do commercials. You remember his commercial from '08, right when you got there. But Tip O'Neill once says politics is personal, and I've merged a few words in there. Politics is local, everything's local. You asked, I am the only countywide Democrat in a Republican county. And people ask me, how did I do that? And it was very easy. I go out and talk to people. I'm on radio, I'm on TV, and I try and do good things for people because I feel like I'm more a public servant.
But they all remember when you actually were a fiscally conservative Republican.
And I'm still fiscally conservative. I'm cheap. Okay. I have not raised a fee in any of my elected offices because usually the county has enough fee income coming in. I've cut expenses. I've tried to train people to do multitask and do better work, but that's a thing. You don't need. It's like, and you talked about our big county, and Ken Bolden, if you're listening, forgive me. He gets $92,000 for chief clerk of the peace. I get 24. I don't complain. I love it. I love the job. I love marrying the people. We do it 7 days a week.
Well, we've got to wrap up things today, but I do want to thank you for making a long drive just to sit in for 40 minutes.
It was worth it.
And then we've got a couple of errands to run. We've got a couple of people to see in Twin Falls before you head back down to Las Vegas, but you'll get to see that drive in the daylight and see those spectacular mountains.
The mountains look good coming up at sunset. I'd like to see more of it when I drive back.
Yeah. John Brady joining us in studio right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Bill Colley with you, and Rush Limbaugh coming up next following the news at 10 o'clock from Fox. Sean Hannity after 1 o'clock news, Glenn Beck after news at 4 o'clock this afternoon.